Mute.
Good evening, everyone. You can hear me? Okay. We're going to call tonight's meeting to order. Welcome to this evening's Committee of Adjustment meeting. Members of the public, applicants, agents, and staff may be participating this evening either in person or virtually via Zoom. For those attending via Zoom, please note that it is our standard practice for members of the public to have their cameras off and microphones muted until it is time for that member to speak. Township staff can assist with muting microphones. If you require assistance, please use the chat function and ask staff. I'm also pleased to advise that this will be being broadcast live on the township's YouTube channel, where a recording of this meeting will be available. Note that the township does not have the ability to edit the live stream of or recorded version of the meeting. Public meetings have been called and notice circulated in accordance with the Planning Act with respect to applicants for minor variance and/or consent. The purpose of public meetings are to inform and provide the public with the opportunity to ask questions and to express views with respect to the applications. The format of the public meeting is as follows. Township staff will introduce the application and report all correspondence received. The next applicant or their agent will present any relevant information. Township staff will then provide further information and clarify any statements of the applicant and or their agent. Following that, the public will be permitted to ask questions and express views on the proposal, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And finally, members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions for clarification of the application. After all comments have been received, the committee will consider the application with due regard to the presentations and views expressed this evening. The committee will then do one of the three following things: approve the application, deny the application, or defer the application pending receipt of additional information. Specified persons who have provided oral submissions or written objections but disagree with the committee's decisions on the application may appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as entitled under the Planning Act. The deadline for an appeal of consent applications is 20 days within the giving of notice, and for minor variances within 20 days of the decision date. When commenting on an application, please first give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that the names and addresses of those individuals who speak at this meeting will appear within the meeting minutes, which are public documents. If you wish to receive a copy of a decision, please leave your name and address with the township staff. Disclosure of any pecuniary interest for the group? No, we're good. Okay. We're going to actually flip right to correspondence at the bottom of the agenda. We're going to start there. Perfect. So just before we start our meeting tonight, we just have to pass a motion, if possible, to adjust the committee chair schedule. Perfect. So for 2025, I was to chair and Richard is to co-chair, and we are going to hopefully adjust that, and Mark will step in for me. Yep. Any discussion? We're all good. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So if we pass that. Oh yeah, we better vote. I don't get one. Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you both. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So motion COA 25-008 moved by, thank you, Michael, and seconded by Megan. Perfect. That the following members be appointed as chairs and vice chairs for the remainder of the term 2025. The chair will be Mark Vandergeest and the vice chair will be Richard Bossy. And then moving forward to 2026, the chair will be Richard Bossy, with the vice chair being Megan Hawkins. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Can I have a vote? Passed. Perfect.
Okay, so moving on, no, it's all good. I can do it from here. So, moving on, going to call for a motion for adoption of the minutes. So I have a motion in front of us, COA 2025-001, moved by member Bossy, second by member Hawkins, that the minutes of the November 19th, 2024 Committee of Adjustment meeting be adopted as printed and distributed. And I call for a vote. All those in favor? Carried. So moving on, would township staff introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for adjourned application identified as D1, which is an application for consent identified as B-04-24.
Thank you, Chair. So as you noted, our first application is an adjourned application, which was previously heard by this committee and deferred at the request of the applicant. This is consent application B0424, power for the lands known municipally as 8645 Severn River. So as noted, this application does request consent seeking to create an approximately 5-meter wide by 61-meter long right-of-way, providing legal access to the benefiting lands known as 1665 Baldy Lane. This application was previously deferred at the May 2024 Committee of Adjustment meeting pending additional information at the request of the applicant. Since that time, the applicant has now advised staff that they wish for this application to return to the committee for decision. So just to summarize the correspondence received, no objections received from any township departments. The fire department would like to remind the applicant that the right-of-way should be maintained at 4 meters wide and in overhead clearance along the entire length of the right-of-way, ensuring and also ensuring that there is a place large enough for fire apparatus to turn around in the event of an emergency. So that just concludes everything to, oh, actually, no. So sorry, so this is a key map of the subject property. You can see the servient lands being 8645 Severn River highlighted in red. Those are the lands that would play host to the right-of-way, serving for access to 1665 Baldy Lane, the dominant lands highlighted in purple. Next slide. Just the 2024 aerial imagery of the two properties. Again, the servient lands being 8645 highlighted in red, and the dominant lands 1665 Baldy Lane highlighted in purple. Again, just a right-of-way sketch here so you can see the approximate limits of where that right-of-way would be proposed. As shown in black, it would just provide access from an existing private road being Baldy Lane up through into the 1665 Baldy Lane. The driveway is currently existing and no site alteration would be required for its installation. These are just a couple site photos that the applicant submitted to staff as part of the application, confirming that the driveway had been installed. The last time the committee's seen this, there was no driveway, but since that time, the applicant has now installed that. The applicable policies, as summarized in the staff report, do not directly regulate right-of-ways, but do exist to ensure protection of the natural environment. As this driveway is existing and no site alteration is required to facilitate its installation, township staff are satisfied that the application is consistent and does not conflict with any of the applicable policy documents. And therefore, staff are recommending that the application be provisionally approved, subject to the recommended conditions as outlined in the staff report. And I'll just quickly go over those conditions. They do include that a reference plan be prepared to legally describe the lands of the right-of-way. A copy of the electronic registration draft deed for the right-of-way be provided for review by the township, together with a signed acknowledgement and direction so that the consent certificate may be issued. The owner's solicitor shall ensure that the right-of-way is legally added to both the dominant and the servient lands so that it's clear in the land registry office that a right-of-way exists. Ensuring the taxes are paid in full up to the date of request for the issuance of the consent certificate. Any fees or disbursements incurred by the township as a result of this application shall be paid for by the owner, and that the owner has 2 years to complete these conditions in accordance with the Planning Act. I would just remind the committee, as this application has been before yourselves earlier, this meeting is not subject to a public hearing, but I do believe that the applicant is in attendance online by Zoom and may have comments to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. To the applicant, do you have anything further you would like to add? Or township staff covered it all? Hearing nothing, we're going to move on. So I'm going to take that as everything's good. So we can just go on. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Seeing as there's none, I'm going to call for a motion. So I have a motion before us, identified as COA 2025-002, moved by member Kish, second by member Hiles, that staff report D25-003 be received and that application for consent B-0424 be provisionally approved, subject to the recommended conditions set out in attachment 4 to staff report D25-003. You're going to call for a vote. All those in favor? We are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You or any interested parties are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. So moving on, would township staff introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for a new application identified as E1, which is application for consent, and minor variance identified as B-16-24 and A-23-24.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak to this application. As noted, the township is in receipt of concurrent minor variance and consent applications for the properties recognized as 4331 and 4313 Burnside Line. In summary, the applicants are proposing the applications to facilitate a lot boundary adjustment between the two properties, as well as to consider the future development of 4313 Burnside Line being the benefiting lands. The applicants propose to transfer a parcel of land with approximate area of 1850 square meters with an approximate frontage of 21.9 meters from 4331 Burnside Line to merge and form part of 4313 Burnside Line. As shown on the screen and as detailed within the staff report, the existing and proposed lot areas and frontages are shown on the screen. And Morgan Planning and Development did provide a detailed planning justification report in support of the application. They are in attendance and do wish to speak following staff's brief introduction. And just to reiterate the minor variances that are being sought, as Burnside Line is an arterial road and a haul route, the minimum setback from the haul route for a new dwelling is 30 meters. The applicants are considering a 20-meter setback. As detailed in the report, the township would require a 5-meter road widening. So part of that request relates to the new lot line, which is extended back further. And as well as a minimum rear yard setback of 9.4 meters for a new dwelling, again, to accommodate that reduced, trying to push the dwelling as far back from the road as is possible. In regards to correspondence received, the building department states no objections. They do state that the location of the proposed building and sewage system cannot be confirmed until the required building permit applications are submitted. At that time, they would be reviewed for compliance with the Ontario Building Code. The Public Works Department states that they do not object to the requested setbacks from the haul route, in consideration of the 5-meter road widening. Public Works understands that the strip would be donated and transferred to the township should the application be approved. And state no further comments at this time and would acknowledge that an entrance permit would be required at a later date. The County of Simcoe indicates that the lands are located within the Township of Severn secondary plan and therefore defer to staff for their opinion on the application. And just further note that all development proposals should be consistent with the new provincial planning statement as applicable. And we did receive one letter of correspondence stating concern with respect to the proposed location of the septic system from the property owners of 4309 Burnside Line. But that's all the correspondence received on this application. As stated, staff from Morgan Planning and Development are here on behalf of the applicant to speak to the application. So I will send it to them.
Okay, I now call on the applicant or their agent to present the application together with any relevant information. So you're free to unmute yourself and share your screen if you have a presentation.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. Can everyone see my screen okay?
We're good.
Perfect, thank you. My name is David Scarsoloni. I am the agent for the client, Ms. Michelle and John Stewart, on behalf of Morgan Planning and Development. We're just here to discuss the consent application for a boundary adjustment and concurrent minor variance applications for the benefiting lands of 4313 Burnside Line and 4331 Burnside Line. Just moving up in scope, the subject lands are located west of Highway 11 near Hawkwich Golf Course and also west of Lake Couchiching. Moving on to the site description, which we'll discuss in this slide. The subject properties are located on the east side of Burnside Line. The surrounding area is comprised of a mixture of rural lands, industrial lands, as well as rural and residential lots. The benefiting lands, 4313 Burnside Line, currently has 25.6 meters of frontage on the Burnside Line, as well as a lot area of 0.156 hectares or 0.4 acres. The property did contain a single detached dwelling, which was recently demolished, and the front and rear of the property are lined with vegetation. 4331 Burnside Line currently has 89.8 meters of frontage on the Burnside Line and an approximate lot area of 0.80 hectares, which is about 2 acres. The property is currently developed with a single detached dwelling, a detached garage, along with a small structure to the rear of the dwelling, and the subject lands are serviced with private water and sanitary services. Moving on to the zoning and official plan designations, the properties are zoned rural residential haul route, with Burnside Line being a haul route, and they are designated rural within the South Division Road secondary plan as seen in the schedule below. Moving forward, the purpose of the consent application is to sever and convey approximately 0.185 hectares from 4331 Burnside Line and merge it to the benefiting lot 4313 Burnside Line. The lots comply with the minimum required lot area and lot frontage requirements for the rural residential haul road zone in accordance with section 319(1)B, which states that where lands are added to an existing undersized lot that complies with A above, the resulting lot shall be deemed to comply. And A states that where a lot having lesser lot area or lot frontage than that being required is created prior to the passing of this bylaw, it's deemed to comply because we are adding area to the lot. And a concurrent minor variance application has also been submitted, which we'll touch on now. As previously mentioned in the presentation, it was noted that a 5-meter right-of-way widening is required, and this road widening has been accounted for with the minor variance provisions being requested. The first minor variance being requested is a reduced minimum front yard setback to a haul route from the required 30 meters to 20 meters, as well as a reduced rear yard setback from 15 meters to 9.4 meters. No variances are required for the retained lands of 4331 Burnside Line. And as we'll touch on later in the presentation, the minor variances requested are consistent with the 4 tests outlined in the planning. And as you can see in the zone matrix on the right, we are compliant with the rest of the provisions of the rural residential haul road zone. Moving forward, here is a conceptual site plan of an approximate location of the property or the single detached dwelling to be developed. There's a potential septic area located on the northwest side there, but that's not to be confirmed yet. So moving on. And as mentioned in the presentation done by staff, these are the proposed and existing lot areas and frontages of the two lots. And moving forward to the planning justification. So a planning justification was submitted by Morgan Planning and Development, which addressed the Planning Act, the Provincial Planning Statement, the County of Simcoe Official Plan, the Township of Severn Official Plan, and the Township of Severn Zoning Bylaw. And as we know, the areas in the South of Division Road Secondary Plan differ from the County of Simcoe Official Plan to the South of Division Road Secondary Plan. And the subject lands are designated rural in accordance with Schedule C to the South of Division Road Secondary Plan. The proposed development is consistent with the policies of the rural designation outlined in section C.6.1. Single detached dwelling is listed as a permitted use within the designation, and the consent conforms to the general consent criteria outlined in BA21. Moving forward, the two minor variances requested are consistent with the four tests outlined in the Planning Act. The proposed variances are considered minor. The proposed variances are desirable for the appropriate development of the land. The proposed variances are maintaining the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as well as maintaining the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Moving forward to a summary of the presentation, the boundary adjustment to sever approximately 0.185 hectares from 4331 Burnside Line to 4313 Burnside Line does not result in the creation of a new lot. This boundary adjustment is consistent with the Planning Act and the Provincial Planning Statement, as well as conforming to the Township of Severn and in that the Township or the South of Division Road Secondary Plan. The resulting retained and severed lots will comply with all zoning provisions, and the consent will facilitate a new dwelling on the benefiting lot. And the two minor variances requested are a reduced minimum front yard setback to a haul route and will accommodate a 5-meter road widening, as well as a reduced minimum rear yard setback to help set back that house to the road widening and haul route. Thank you. If there are any questions from members of public or from the Committee of Adjustment, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Okay, thank you very much. Do township staff have anything further to add to the materials and the information presented by the applicant, their agent, or any recommended conditions as applicable?
Thank you, Chair. I will reshare the staff presentation and go over any additional comments or recommended conditions. So I will be pretty brief with the summary of the context of the property, as Mr. Scarsoni has provided a very detailed examination of the application. So as stated, the lands are kind of directly located beside the office here on Burnside Line. Shown here, they're just north of the intersection of Burnside Line and Highway 11. Again, this is just an aerial image of the subject property, depicting the current approximate lot boundaries. As shown here, this is the proposed boundary adjustment sketch. So the lands that are in the blue hatching are what are proposed to be transferred from the property being 4331 Burnside Line to 4313 Burnside Line. As shown on the screen is a conceptual building envelope. At this time, this is understood to not be the final building envelope, and any building permit applications or septic permit applications that would come forward in the future, should the application be approved, would be required to comply with all Ontario Building Code requirements, such as setbacks from other wells, property lines, things like that. So as stated by the chief building official, this might not be the final location of the proposed septic system. That would be evaluated at the time of building permit application to ensure that it is appropriately cited in compliance with the Ontario Building Code. Otherwise, the application would be evaluated against the zoning bylaw or any approved minor variances should the application be approved by the committee. So as outlined in the staff report, Morgan Planning and Development have provided a planning justification report, which provides a detailed analysis of the application against the applicable prescribed policy. Planning staff do not object to the opinions presented by Morgan Planning and Development, and therefore have no objections to the provisional approval of the consent and approval of the minor variance. The recommended conditions of consent are shown on the screen. They are pretty typical conditions associated with a lot boundary adjustment, with the exception of the road widening. So with respect to recommended condition number 1, a reference plan of the severed parcel be prepared and reviewed by the Secretary Treasurer before registration. A copy of the electronic registration in preparation draft deed be reviewed so the certificate may be issued. That the applicant's lawyer ensure that the lands merge with and not be separately conveyable from the benefiting lands, and that they provide an undertaking to demonstrate how that would be achieved. And pertaining to item number 6, this is speaking to the required road widening. So a strip of land 5 meters in depth across the entire frontage of the lands on Burnside line be transferred to the township of Severn for the purposes of a road widening at the sole expense of the applicant, free and clear of all encumbrances. Again, this is just because the property is located along Burnside line, being an arterial road. The Township of Severn Transportation Master Plan sets out minimum width requirements for municipal road allowances. And this is how that is typically obtained through Planning Act applications, where a portion of the property is transferred to the township for the purposes of road widening. And then conditions number 7 and 8 are typical conditions: municipal taxes paid in full, and that the conditions set out be completed within 2 years of the date of this decision. With respect to the minor variances, the recommended conditions would be that municipal taxes be paid to date, that the construction is in compliance with the plan submitted, and that the existing vegetation on the property shall be preserved and enhanced as much as possible. But thank you, Chair. That's what I have for this presentation. It's certainly available for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. I am seeing none, so I'm going to move forward. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Okay, please address your questions for me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. And you're going to have to speak into the microphone because we're live on YouTube.
My name is Terry Sumpton, Sumpton. I live at 4309 Burnside line next to the 4313. In regards to that picture that showed the house location and septic bed, I did understand that they have to get approval for the septic when it does come down, because right now where it's approved, it's right on their existing well, and it's approximately 15 to 20 feet from my existing well. So I just want to put that concern in.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I believe the township staff addressed that when they went through that. This is just so you know, this is the conceptual of what's happening, but all those things will be addressed as part of the building permit process. So every regulatory requirement that's out there from a well and septic and all that perspective will be captured at that point, which may require the alteration of that site plan to change through that whole process.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no concern with the expansion of the land.
Okay,
good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions or comments, I declare the public portion of the application is closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Seeing as there's none, I'm going to call for a motion. I have a motion in front of us identified as COA 2025-003, moved by member Hiles, second by member Bossy, that staff report D25-001 be received, and that the matter of consent application B-16-24, the application be provisionally approved subject to the recommended conditions included as attachment 5 to staff report D25-001, and further that in the matter of minor variance application A-16 23-24, the application be approved, subject to the recommended conditions included as attachment 6 to staff report D 24-001. And a call for a vote. All those in favor, carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You, the applicant, or any interested parties are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. So moving on, would township staff introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for E-E2, which is an application for minor variance identified as A-35-22.
Thank you, Chair. As noted, the next application on the agenda for this evening is a new minor variance application for the lands recognized as 3380 Russell Drive. As part of their proposed minor variance application, and as outlined in the report, the applicant is seeking relief from the zoning bylaw to recognize the unauthorized construction of an accessory shed and shoreline structures, including an unenclosed deck, sauna, and docks, to bring the property into compliance with the township zoning bylaw. As outlined in the report and as shown on the screen, the applicants are seeking a number of minor variances from section 3 to 11, exceptions to yard requirements to accommodate a reduced rear yard setback for a shed. Section 328 for accessory structure coverage. 3.2.12.4 for the maximum shoreline coverage of shoreline structures. 3.2.12.6 to request a maximum of 2 docks where 1 is permitted. 3.2.12.6B, a reduced side yard setback for a dock. 3.2.12.6D, a maximum dock width of 5.7 meters. 3.2.12.11, an unenclosed deck, seeking a larger size and height for the deck. And 3.2.12.12 for a sauna, seeking reduced side yard setback. As included in the report, the Public Works Department state no objections to the reduced setback of the existing shed. Through review of the application, they note that part of the existing driveway is noted to be removed. The requirements for removal would include the secondary entrance to the west, as only 1 entrance would be permitted. The removal of the entrance would require a road occupancy permit. The building department states no objections to the proposed minor variance. All construction requires approved building permits and must be in compliance with the Ontario Building Code. They further state that an order to comply has been issued to the property for the construction started without a building permit, which the applicant seeks to rectify through this application. Comments were also received from the Trans-Severn Waterway and Parks Canada, indicating that they were not in support of the application as currently presented. Additional public correspondence was also received, including 4 letters of support that the applicant submitted from the property owners of 3426 Russell Drive, 3372 Russell Drive, 3420 Russell Drive, 3388 Russell Drive. We also received 2 letters in objection to the application. Further to their previous letter, the property owners of 3388 Russell Drive provided a revised letter in objection to the application, as well as a letter of objection from the property owners of 3300 Russell Drive. The applicant's agent is in attendance this evening and does wish to address the committee.
Okay, I now call on the applicant or their agent to please present the application together with any relevant information. Please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like. If you have a presentation, you may share your screen.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Not really.
Not really? How's that? Still? Okay.
Yeah, so it's okay. We can read lips. It's not really loud, so.
Okay, let me try. How's this?
Slightly better.
Okay, I will try to enunciate as well. Good evening, Chair and Committee. Thank you. My name is Debbie Vandenakker. I am a senior planner at Planscape. We're located in Bracebridge, 104 Kimberley Avenue, P1L 1Z8. So first I should start by thanking staff for all of their responses and their communication on this file. We are asking for a deferral until next month. Once we receive the staff report and we have had the opportunity to review the complaints from the neighbors, there are significant changes that will be made to this application. I thought I would take the time, if that suits the committee, to just address some of the comments from the neighbors and just review the changes that we are proposing to make. So Scott is actually a drafter, the owner of the property. He will be making these changes himself. And so we will provide this to staff as soon as we can. So I wanted to share, you can see this screen okay? These are my hand-drawn markups that will go back to do this. So I just wanted to quickly say that the docks, this floating section and this section that is front of this dry boathouse or marine storage facility, doesn't really matter what the term is. In front of it, those will be removed. Some plantings will be provided in this area, and then the deck will be minimized to the amount of, that is appropriate and permitted. It will still be, portions of it will still be above a meter, so there will still be required a variance on that. But the difference being, of course, it will be much, much smaller. And it's because of the slope of the property. There's a steep sort of rock edge that is built on right now. And so the first set of comments are from G Pong, and wanted to know mostly about structures built on top of that deck. And so I wanted to just advise that one, that would require a building permit, and that would need to be approved in future. And two, the deck size will be significantly reduced, and so that should alleviate some of that concern. The second, stop sharing my screen. The second set of comments spoke to a number of issues. I'm just going to speak to the ones that I hope that I can help with. The others are for staff to deal with. So one of the things that was mentioned, what it says, it's very concerning that the applicant's planning justification brief states that water is flowing down the slope of the property directly into the water. So one of the things that Scott had wanted to do was install this sort of live mechanism on, there's a path that goes down to the water to just slow down water. So my background, I came from the Conservation Authority. One of the things that I saw when I went on site is how steep the slope is and how close that is to the shoreline. And so one of the things that we had discussed was slowing down the water before it can enter the waterway. That is just a standard general principle of maintaining water quality. And so I just wanted to clear up that when I spoke about that, it's just gravity and rainwater going down. There is no other source of water that's going down there. So hopefully that alleviates that concern. There was a request for an environmental assessment regarding what is living in the rocks. I believe what they meant was an environmental impact study. That has not been required from staff, nor would I think that that was appropriate given the development on the lands. There are only 3 accessory structures. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about the fact that the accessory structure in front has been called an existing dry boathouse, and in a previous application it was called marine storage. Either way, it is not a boathouse that is connected to the water, so a boat does not go in and get stored in. It's for the recreation materials and for the supplies used on the water, those kind of things. There was a comment about Ministry of Natural Resources. Ministry of Natural Resources are not involved, nor are they an authority in terms of what the application involves. There was a request about consequences to the applicant. Just that's never been something that I have seen in all the applications that we put through. And then we did state that surrounding properties are similar developed along the water. So one of the things we wanted to make sure, and of course I'm sure that you understand, about the neighborhood surrounding this property. What does it look like? How does it function? What are the other similar landscapes like? And so when I said that it was similarly developed, I meant there is a lot of lawn going right up to the water along the waterway. I'm sure you've seen it, lots of dock structures, all of those things. So that's how I characterize that as similar. So I hope those elements help. The intent here, the Parks Canada, I should address that as well. So by removing the docks, limiting the docks that are there, it will now conform to the zoning bylaw. And therefore Parks Canada has stated in their comment that they can't support the minor variance because it doesn't conform to the zoning bylaw, but this will bring it into conformity that way. So there will still be 3 variances required. It's about setback and the width of that dock along the shoreline, but it will conform to the 25%. So this will come back to committee and I'll do a more thorough presentation of the ultimate result, but I wasn't sure if those members of the public were in attendance and maybe I could alleviate some of those concerns while I was here. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and we are formally and respectfully requesting a deferral until your March meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do township staff have anything further to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant and their agent this evening?
Thank you, Chair. So as described by Ms. Vandenakker, the lands are located along the Trent-Severn waterway. As shown on screen is a current aerial photo from 2024 of the subject property depicting the current development on the property and in the shoreline area. As part of this application, the subject shed, the deck, the sauna, and the docking structures all have variances requested as related to those structures. And this is the site plan that was submitted with the application as was circulated and initially proposed by the applicants. We understand that the applicants are seeking a deferral consistent with the staff report to allow for opportunity for a revised proposal. Staff would evaluate the proposal at that time and wouldn't be able to comment on the revised proposal through this meeting, but would review that against all of the applicable policy documents and tests once received. Here's a couple of site photos from staff's site inspection. So as shown on the left is a picture of the subject deck, and shown on the right is a panoramic photo of the front yard area of the subject property between the dwelling and the shoreline. So as outlined in the report, staff are unable to complete a wholesome review of the application under the current applicable policy and test to the standard of the Planning Act based on the proposal as currently presented. That being said, planning and development staff would recommend deferral of the application at this time for the reasons outlined within the staff report. I do have a recommended motion for committee's consideration and am available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any persons participating virtually via Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? I'm going to ask that you please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Okay, don't see anybody or hear from anybody, so I'm going to move on. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Please address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, please give your name and address for the minutes. Don't see anybody. If there's no further.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I have comments.
Okay, so we're gonna need to get your name and your address for the minutes.
Okay, my name is Christine Collin, and I reside at 3300 Russell Drive in Port Severn. And I strongly oppose the application for minor variance in this matter. I submitted a letter this afternoon expressing my outrage that the applicant has been allowed more than 2 years after an order to comply was issued by the township for numerous violations of the bylaws at his property. Apparently, the applicant has been allowed to enjoy the illegal structures all of this time. And he was not an innocent purchaser, as I understand it, as the staff report states that he purchased the property with knowledge of the outstanding order to comply. It appears that negative environmental impacts are occurring at the property. The extent of the damage cannot be known at this time because key documents have not been released to the public, like the order to comply and the Trans-Severn Waterway response, for example. And I imagine also the response of Parks Canada. In my view, the report should be amended to include all the missing documents to satisfy the Planning Act notice requirements, and the new report be received at another meeting and the matter be rescheduled. There is also no mention in the staff report of any involvement of the Ministry of Natural Resources or an independent environmental assessment company to survey any environmental damage due to the building on top of rock outcroppings, which may be what are known as rock barrens. Rock barrens serve as critical habitat for wildlife and nesting and breeding grounds for various species at risk. And a nearby property at 3600 Narrows Road is a testament to the Ministry of Natural Resources getting involved to protect these outcroppings or rock barrens from development. Also, nowhere is it mentioned in the staff report about a possible violation by the so-called boathouse. And as I understand it, the representative for Planscape has said that it's not really a boathouse. It's a storage facility. And I don't believe that's allowed if it's being represented as a boathouse, and it's not one. And they already have a marine storage unit, as I understand it. The advertised real estate photos of this property show that so-called boathouse was marketed not as a boathouse at all, but rather a games room / bunkie equipped with couches, dining room table and chairs, coffee table, and a large stand-up hockey table, etc. This is right at the shoreline. And to me, it is absolutely a complete interference with the environment for no reasonable purpose. Ironically, there appears to be no room for a boat in those photos. Has anyone inspected the boathouse to ensure it complies and that it isn't being used for what it appears to be? In my view, it should be torn down. There is also no mention of what appear to be more than the maximum 3 accessory buildings on the property, which would also be a zoning bylaw violation. If you look at the photo attached in my letter, you will see the excess in the overdeveloped front yard of this property. This type of overdevelopment near the water appears to be against the County of Simcoe official plan, the Township of Severn official plan, the Township of Severn Council approved official plan, the zoning bylaws, and good planning principles. Again, I strongly oppose the application for minor variance in this matter, as it is not minor in whole or in part. Many of the structures at issue were built without permits, and the applicant knew about the order to comply when he purchased the property. The applicant has had more than enough time, more than 2 years, to bring this property into complete compliance. The whole of the offending structures should be torn down
Ms.
and
Collins?
the natural environment restored. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I didn't hear any specific questions in there. So Going to move on. So I'm going to declare the public portion of the meeting closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Kish.
So I guess just a couple questions. What limits the height of the deck? So if we say that we're allowed to have something over 1 meter, how high can we go before it becomes unacceptable?
Through to township staff.
Thank you, Chair. That particular section of the zoning bylaw that regulates the construction of unenclosed freestanding decks only allows them to have a height of 1 meter. Anything higher than that would require a minor variance, which is what the applicants are seeking.
I guess my question is, or sorry,
Go ahead.
through the chair to staff. If we just say that it's greater than 1, what stops them from building something that's 20 meters tall?
Through the chair, thank you for those comments. Perhaps that is something that the applicants may wish to consider through their revised application.
Thank you. And just
Okay,
one
go ahead.
more thing. I guess at what point does a deck become enclosed? So I'm just looking at like the tiki hut that's on that deck. Like what is that considered from an enclosed versus unenclosed versus structure standpoint?
Through the chair to member Kish, the zoning bylaw considers anything that has more than 2 walls as being enclosed. So if the structure was to kind of have walls attached to it or a roof attached to it and kind of be enclosed, then that would be what would push that structure into being an enclosed deck and would be subject to different sections of the zoning bylaw.
So I guess just as a follow-up, what would the tiki hut be considered under bylaw?
Thank you, Chair. At this point, I wouldn't be able to answer that question. Perhaps that is something that can be discussed by the applicants through the revised proposal. From my understanding, that would be a different structure located on top of that unenclosed deck.
Any other questions? Member Bossy.
I guess through the chair to the applicant, the floating docks with the sea-doos, are they going to be taken away or they have been taken away?
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, they will be. And they weren't there when I was on my site visit. And my understanding is that they are not going back in. But as we're reducing the application to remove that portion of the dock along the front, as well as in front of that dry boathouse, yes, they won't be there, and they're temporary. I believe they float in, they attach temporarily, and then they move again.
Okay. Member Bossy.
So the variance request for the second dock, is that off, but not in here anymore? Or is it still being requested?
Through township staff.
Thank you, Chair. I would defer to the applicants with respect to what they'd like to request the revised proposal. At this time, it's our understanding that Severn Waterway is not in support of that particular request.
Member Bossy.
When does a deck become a dock? Like if you look in front of the boathouse, that decking, it almost looks like a dock.
Township staff.
Thank you through to member Bossy. Once the structure it encroaches over the shoreline, then it is considered a docking structure. We are looking to clarify the definitions of dock and decks through a future housekeeping amendment in the zoning bylaw to make that extraordinarily clear.
Thank you. Good. Anybody else? Seeing none. I would be in support of a deferral for this application. So I think most people are, and the applicant is. So I'm going to call for a motion for deferral. So I have a motion in front of me, identified as COA 2025-004, moved by member Hawkins, second by member Kish, that staff report D25-006 be received and that the matter of minor variance application A-35-22, the minor variances to section 3.2.8 coverage and 3.2.11 exceptions to yard requirements, 3.2.12.11 unenclosed deck, and 3.2.12.12 sauna be deferred pending the revised proposal, including the associated planning justification. And then in the matter of minor variance application A-35-22, the minor variances to section 3.2.12.4 maximum width and 3.2.12.6 docking facilities, that the applicant and their agent consider the comments provided by the Trent Severn Waterway Parks Canada regarding the requested dock variances as set out in staff report D25-006 as part of the recommended deferral. And further, that a revised proposal be brought back to the committee at or before June 17, 2025 meeting in consideration of Planning Act notices and review requirements, or the file will be closed. I'm going to call for a vote on that. We're carried. The hearing for this application is closed. You, the applicant or agent, or any interested parties are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. So would township staff introduce the application, report on any response to the notice circulated for agenda item E3, which is an application for minor variance identified as A-01-25.
Thank you, Chair. So the next public hearing is for minor variance A01-25 for the lands known as 1687 Peninsula Point Road. So a minor variance is requested to permit an increased accessory building / structure lot coverage on the property, facilitating the construction of a detached garage in the rear yard. So in this case, it would be between Peninsula Point Road and the dwelling is the rear yard of this property. The township zoning bylaw typically allows for a maximum accessory coverage of 5%. Through this application, the applicant is requesting a 5.5% coverage. Just summarizing the correspondence received, there were no comments or objections received from the clerk's office or the Public Works and Fire and Emergency Services departments. The building department did advise of no objection to this application either, but just wishes to advise the applicant that they must ensure proper clearance to the existing sewage system on the property through the building permit application. At this point, I will turn it over to the applicant's agent, who is in attendance this evening, and to provide any further comments. Thank you.
Mr. Wassenaar, do you have any comments? Hearing that the applicant or the agent does not have anything further to present, so we can carry on. Do township staff have anything further to add to materials and information at all and go through the recommended conditions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as noted on this slide, you can see the subject lands highlighted in red. They are located on the eastern side of this peninsula, just off of Peninsula Point Road. Next slide. The 2024 aerial imagery, so you can see the existing dwelling located closest to the shoreline. There's also a small accessory structure located between the dwelling and the water, together with a dock, which are proposed to stay on this property. To the rear, in between the dwelling and the road, there is a pool shed that is proposed to stay on the property. There's also an existing smaller accessory structure just to the right of the gravelled area to the rear where the new garage is proposed to be constructed. And that accessory building is to be removed through this proposal. Again, just quickly summarizing those existing structures located on site together with that one shed that is proposed to be removed. Next slide. So the applicable policies here act to maintain a hierarchy between the principal and accessory buildings on a property, especially on residential properties. It is the opinion of township staff that this application maintains the intent of those policies and that the proposed detached garage would be a subordinate structure on the lands. The siting of the proposed detached garage is located outside of the mapped floodplain area of the Severn River, so the hazard land policies do not apply in this case, and the application is considered to be consistent with the direction of those. I did just want to point out to the committee that with the construction of this detached garage, the property would still be in compliance with the maximum permitted 15% lot coverage. So it is just the accessory structure coverage that is being requested for variance here. Lastly, during staff's site inspection, we did note that there is a shipping container on the property. Those structures are not permitted by the township zoning bylaw in a residential zone. So staff have recommended a condition to address that matter. Given all of that, township staff have no objections to the approval of this application, subject to the recommended conditions, which are detailed on the next slide. Maybe they're not, but anyways, the conditions are just that taxes be paid for this property, the existing lands be brought into compliance with the township zoning bylaw, the existing vegetation be preserved and enhanced as much as possible, and that the construction shall be in compliance with the plans submitted with the application. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually via Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Seeing or hearing none, are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? I'm seeing none. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare the public portion of the application closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Bossy.
On the conditions, were we going to address the container on the conditions or somewhere else?
I think I can answer that. I believe there was a condition in there that had the property coming into compliance with the zoning bylaw, which would capture that.
Okay, and my second question is to staff through the chair, sorry.
Yeah.
Is there a percent allowed garage, I guess a ratio garage space versus living space?
Through to township staff.
Through the chair, member Bossy, yes, the township zoning bylaw regulates the size of accessory buildings to a maximum of 75% of the floor area of the dwelling. This garage complies with that requirement. It's just the accessory coverage that a variance has been requested for.
Good. So I'm seeing nothing else. So I'm going to call for a motion. I have a motion in front of us. Identified as COA 2025-005, moved by member Bossy, second by member Hawkins. That staff report D25-004 be received, and further that minor variance application A-01-25 be approved, subject to the conditions included as attachment 4 to staff report D25-004. And a call for a vote. All those in favor, we are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You, the applicant or agent, or any other interested parties are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. Would township staff introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for E-4, which is an application for minor variance identified as A-02-25.
Thank you, Chair. As noted, the next application on the agenda this evening is application for a minor variance affecting the lands recognized as 3759 Wayman Line. The applicants are seeking a minor variance to allow for an increased accessory building height to accommodate the construction of an attached single-story garage. The subject property is partially located within the settlement area of Marchmont. That is where the house and development of the property is located. So the actual construction of the garage would be within the settlement area boundary. As indicated on table 1, the specific variance being requested is a height of 6 meters for the attached garage where a height of 5 meters is permitted. I would just note that, or reiterate again, that it is for a single-story garage. So it wouldn't exceed the requirements of the zoning bylaw in that sense, but would just be to permit for an increased height, mostly due to the slope of the roof of the structure. Correspondence received on the application and included in the staff report was the building department stated no objection to the proposed minor variance and indicates that a building permit is required prior to starting any construction on the garage. No other comments or objections were received from other internal departments or agencies. I believe the applicant may be in attendance this evening and may wish to address the committee. However, staff are available and can provide further information on the application.
Okay, I now call on the applicant and or their agent to please present the application together with any relevant information. Need the applicant at all? No, so the applicant is not here. The applicant is not here, so we can move forward. So do township staff have anything further to add to the materials that come along with this application?
Thank you, Chair. I can speak to the application. So as shown on the screen here, the property is located at 3759 Wayman Line. It's across approximately from Providence Lane and Marchmont Road, north of the Division Road West intersection. As shown here, the subject property is developed with a single detached dwelling at the front of the property. I will just note again that the front of the property is located within the settlement area of Marchmont where growth and development is directed to occur. The rear of the property is in the Township and County of Simcoe Greenlands land use designation. However, staff do note that the actual development is located substantially far away from that and is fully located within the settlement area. So as shown on screen, the applicants proposed the construction of the attached garage at the front of the structure. The house is currently under renovation with approved building permits for other portions of the structure. However, the applicants are seeking the minor variance specifically for the construction of the garage. So as shown here, this is the new elevations as proposed by the applicant. Elevations related to the actual dwelling itself are have been approved through a building permit application. To match the height of the new roof elevation to be completed through the renovation, the applicants are seeking the increased height for the proposed attached garage. And again, I would just reiterate that the garage itself will not exceed a single story. So that aspect is in compliance with the zoning bylaw. It is strictly just an increased height for the slope of the roof. And these are photos of the structure as it currently exists. So on the left of the screen, you can see sort of a front facing photo of the house. The garage is to be located on the front facing wall of the structure, approximately located here. As outlined in the staff report, the subject property is located within the settlement area of Marchmont where growth is directed, and therefore it is the opinion of staff that the application is consistent with the PPS, the official plans, and the 4 tests for a minor variance. All that being said, staff have no objections to the approval of the application subject to the recommended conditions. Those being municipal taxes paid to date, that the construction is in substantial compliance with the plan submitted, and that the existing vegetation on the property be preserved and enhanced as much as possible. Thank you, Chair. That's all I have for this application, but available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to this application? I'm hearing none. Are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to this application? I'm seeing none. If there are no further questions or comments, I declare the public portion of the application closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? I'm seeing none. I call for a motion. So motion before me identified as COA 2025-006, moved by member Kish, second by member Hiles, that staff report D25-002 be received and that further that minor variance application A-02-25 be approved, subject to the conditions included as attachment 5 to staff report D25-002. I call for a vote. All those in favor? We are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. We're going to be moving on to the next application. So would township staff briefly introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for E5, which is an application for minor variance identified as A-03-25.
Thank you, Chair. So our final application this evening, minor variance A0325 for the lands located at 157 Brandon Avenue in Coldwater. The applicant has submitted this minor variance application requesting reduced interior and rear yard setbacks, together with an increased lot coverage, to legalize an existing deck as well as a shed that have been constructed on the lands. The deck was constructed without the benefit of a building permit, and the subdivision agreement, which does apply to the lands, prohibits buildings and structures within identified swales. To summarize, the minor variance is requested, the first being an increased lot coverage. The township zoning bylaw permits a maximum lot coverage of 35% for these lands, which was granted through a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment for the Greenwood Landing subdivision. The applicant has requested a coverage of 38.9%, a reduced interior yard setback for the shed of 0.9 meters, where 1.5 meters is normally required, as well as a reduced rear yard setback for the shed of 1.4 meters, where a setback of 1.5 meters is normally required by the bylaw. In terms of correspondence received on this application, there were no comments or objections received from the clerk's office or the Fire and Emergency Services Department. The township's building department advised no objection to the requested minor variances, but advised that the applicant, advises the applicant that the limiting distance requirements of the Ontario Building Code will need to be addressed as part of the building permit process. The Public Works Department supports and reiterates the comments of the township's consulting engineer. The township's consulting engineer advised that the rear yard swale system across lots 1 through 5 is to intercept a rear yard drainage from these lots and direct it out to the Gill Street ditching, as so that it does not release directly onto the existing private property to the north. The consulting engineer does recommend that the shed be relocated ahead of the swale, leaving the transition slope to the abutting property undisturbed and vegetated as originally intended. Additionally, the Severn Sound Environmental Association commented on this application as it is captured within the wellhead protection area. Essentially, the SSEA has advised that the application does not or would not be considered a significant drinking water threat and therefore has no objection to the application. Additionally, there were 3 letters of support received from abutting landowners at 155 and 159 Brandon Avenue, which are the properties on either side of the subject lands, together with 16 Sunset Crescent, which are those lands immediately to the north. Additionally, the committee was provided with on-desk materials to this evening of a letter that was submitted by the property owner. Township staff do have that those materials together with a presentation that the applicant has prepared, which we can put on screen for the property owner should they wish during their address to the committee. I will leave it at that and turn it over to the property owner. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on the applicant. They would wish to present their application together with any relevant information. So you're gonna have a seat and you're gonna unmute yourself and gonna present live on YouTube.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm Dwight Peer, and this is my wife, Vicki Candle, and we are the residents at 157 Brandon Avenue in Coldwater. I do have some photos that we want to present with respect to the construction on our property. I have prepared I think it was described as a letter, but it really is a submission, and I I wanted to provide it verbally. I don't know whether that's necessary or not, but I wish to kind of put it on the record because we are making the application with respect to lot coverage and our interior and rear yard setbacks. But I did want to take the opportunity to kind of explain to the committee some of our observations and perhaps attempt to clarify some information, particularly as it regards the swale that crosses our property. Okay. With respect to our deck construction, we began the permit process making plan submissions for the deck, but became frustrated as the time moved into the fall. We abandoned our deck application in the fall of 2023. We did not get a permit for our deck construction, and we sincerely apologize for that. We had moved to Coldwater from Oro-Medonte and downsized our home. We were looking forward to having additional storage space prior to winter. We contacted Severn Township and were advised that we could build a shed up to 10 by 16 and that a building permit was not required for that. We did build a 10 by 14 shed. We completed a majority of the shed construction in late fall of 2023. During the summer of 2024, we constructed our deck. To close out our abandoned deck permit application, Severn Township Building Inspector attended our residence during the fall of 2024 to inspect our deck construction. We received the results of his inspection in November of 2024, and it was this time that we were advised that with the two structures built, we exceeded our lot coverage by 3.9%. Subsequently, I attended the township office, received advice on the minor variance process, and we proceeded with an application and paid our applicable fees. So in seeking these minor variances regarding our lot coverage and setbacks related to the location of our shed, we are seeking to remediate our situation. With respect to the staff report, we did receive a staff report on our minor variance request, and we've reviewed the report, and we have included some comments below. With respect to the 4 test assessment, we agree that our request for minor variance for an increase in the lot coverage is in general conformity and does not conflict with the provincial planning statement. Our deck is a reasonable size and well-constructed amenity space and not inconsistent with the decks in our neighborhood. It does not interfere with the drainage and allows water to drain through the gaps in the deck boards. Our shed is 10 by 14, as I stated earlier. Well constructed of wood. It's constructed on pillars with deck blocks and does not interfere with the drainage on our lot or lots adjacent to ours. We disagree with the assessment that our requested minor variance for reduced interior and rear yard setbacks do not maintain the general intent and purpose of the County of Simcoe and the Township of Severn official plans. We will show through our submission that our shed is not located within the swale and in no way obstructs, impedes, interferes with storm draining flow through any part of the storm swale. Once it is acknowledged that our shed is not located in the swale and that our shed does not interfere with the swale, our requested reduced inside and rear setbacks will be shown to maintain the general intent and purpose of the County of Simcoe and the Township of Severn official plans. With respect to general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, we agree that our request for minor variance to the increased lot coverage maintains the general intent and purpose of the County of Simcoe and Township of Severn official plan. Again, our deck is a reasonable size in relation to our lot, is well constructed and not inconsistent with decks with the type of deck construction common in our neighborhood. Our deck does not interfere with stormwater drainage in any significant way and allows water to drain through the spaces between the deck boards and ground. We believe that with respect to our shed position and our interior yard and rear yard setbacks, that we maintain sufficient separation between our shed and our neighboring properties. There is ample room to allow access around the building for construction and maintenance. The interior yard setback presently allows space for an adult to walk between the shed and fence to the rear of the property. The shed does not obstruct, impede, or interfere with the storm swale, as it is sited behind the swale on the slope of our rear property. If work is required on the swale, there is no impediment for technicians to conduct their work. We have photos related to that, to the shed, of course. With respect to the last part of the test, we agree that our requested minor variance for an increased coverage is desirable for the appropriate development and use of the lands. I believe our deck is reasonable size, as I've stated, constructed well, and allows water to drain between the gaps of the deck boards. It is attractive and not inconsistent with the other decks in the neighborhood. However, we disagree with our request. We disagree that our request for the reduced interior and rear yard setbacks are not minor or desirable for the appropriate development and use of lands. We believe that we can show through this submission that our deck is not within the swale. That our shed is not in the swale and is not in conflict with our subdivision agreement. Once it is acknowledged that this shed is situated behind the swale and not within, over, or upon it, and that the shed does not obstruct, impede, or interfere with the drainage flowing in the swale in any manner, then our minor variance request related to our rear and interior setbacks will be shown to be minor and desirable for appropriate development and use of the lands. With respect to our shed construction, we constructed a 10 by 14 wooden shed on the slope that extends to our rear property boundary. The shed is constructed behind the swale that traverses our rear yard. The shed is constructed on a platform of pressure-treated lumber with 9 6x6 pressure-treated pillars with concrete deck blocks providing the footings. This construction provided for minimal disturbance of the ground on the slope and minimal footprint in contact with the slope. The platform is slightly above the grade of the grass at the front of the shed and extends from just behind the peak of the slope level toward the rear property line, our rear property line. The swale is approximately 2 feet in front of the shed. We took possession of our property in June 2023, and we observed the installation of the swale that summer. The swale is relatively narrow, lined with landscape cloth with a plastic subdrain, a big O type, backfilled with gravel and topsoil and covered with sod. Prior to the sod being placed, the swale was shaped in a V to its center. The swale can clearly be seen running laterally across our yard and our neighbors' lots to the ditch at Gill Street and Sunset Crescent. The staff report explains that the swale with subdrain was installed across the rear of the subject lands to intercept drainage and direct it to Gill Street ditching rather than releasing it onto the lands to the north. This description confirms that the swale in question is the same that we observed being installed ahead of the slope in our rear yard. It should be noted that the plan that we received on closing, as well as the plan provided by the township with respect to this application, does not notate rear yard swale. The staff report further states, per the subdivision agreement, this swale is not to be impeded in any way, and no buildings or structures are permitted within it. When positioning our shed, we were aware of the location of the swale and took every precaution to build behind it without any disruption to it. We therefore disagree with the comment attributed to the building inspector in the staff report regarding our shed located on page 2 of 12 in paragraph 1. The building inspector noted that a shed had been constructed in the rear yard drainage swale, and the claim the claim in the staff report that our shed is positioned within the swale. As we explained above, this is not the case. Our shed is constructed on our yard behind the swale. According to our subdivision agreement and our agreement of purchase and sale, our lot is not subject to any easement areas. In relation to our subdivision agreement, Part 6, storm drain, according to section 18.6, swale and easement areas, and with respect to our shed, we attest that we have not constructed any works, removed or permitted to be removed any soil from the said swale, excavated, drilled, installed, or erected in, over, upon, under, through the said swale, a fence, well, foundation, pavement, building, or other structure or installation. In addition to the staff report, we also received the report following the inspection of our deck on November 27, 2024. This report includes engineering comments that say the subject property has an existing drainage swale along the rear of the lot and directs us to see the grading plan attached. If permissions for the shed are granted, the shed should be relocated in front of the swale to avoid impact to its intended function. This statement implies, in a similar fashion to the building inspector's comments and the staff report, that our shed is within the swale. However, in fact, the shed is located behind the swale and does not in any way impact its intended function. As to relocating the swale, as to relocating the shed, our shed in front of the swale, this is somewhat perplexing to us, as it is likely the shed located on a grade above the swale would interfere with the swale's intended function by interrupting the flow of water to the swale. The staff report, page 4-5 of 12, states that by locating a shed or any building or structure within the swale, it has the potential to impede the flow of stormwater, and the weight of such buildings or structures could compromise the subdrain below the grade. Again, our shed is not located within the swale. It is located on the slope of our yard behind the swale. It has been there for 15 months, and we see no evidence of interference with the swale's function. We have witnessed no movement in the structure, nor are we aware of any drainage issues in our neighbors, with our neighbors following our shed's construction. The staff report contains a recommendation from the consulting engineer. Page 5 comments from departments, agencies, and public, stating the shed should be this shed should be ahead of the swale, relocated ahead of the swale, leaving the transition slope to the abutting property undisturbed and vegetated as originally intended. With respect to this recommendation, we are not aware or in possession of any documentation or plans indicating that the slope at the rear of our yard is a part of the swale. The swale is described in the staff report, which stipulates the swale with subdrain was installed across the rear of the subject lands to intercept drainage directed to Gill Street ditching rather than releasing it onto lands at the north. This does not indicate that the slope is part of the swale. The swale is located above and in front of the top of the rear yard slope, which is close to the middle of our rear yard as it is to the back. We can say that in the construction of our shed, the slope remains as it was originally graded, and that the shed is built on a platform with 9 6x6 pillars positioned on the deck blocks on the slope. There is space between the grade and the bottom of our shed. We understand that the intent of the swale is to intercept stormwater so that it doesn't flow onto our neighbor's property. Once again, this is why we located our shed behind the swale on the slope of our rear yard. As per our subdivision agreement, Part 6, storm drainage, Section 18.5, interference with storm swales or easements. Our shed is in no way obstructing, impeding, or interfering with storm drainage flow through any part of the storm swale. In conclusion, we feel that our minor variance for increased lot coverage of 3.9%, sorry, I think it is 3.9%, meets the 4 tests as supported in the staff report. We urge the committee to accept our submission and acknowledge that our shed is not situated in, over, or upon the swale that runs through our lot. That in its present location, there is no evidence to suggest that our shed causes any obstruction, impediment, or interference with drainage in the swale on our lot or any adjacent lots. Once this aspect is acknowledged, we believe that our request for minor variances for reduced interior of 0.9 meters and rear yard 1.4 meters setbacks will be assessed as meeting the 4 tests, and that you will support our shed remaining in its present location. We believe the considerations that we made regarding the shed location optimized the use of our property in an aesthetic way while not impacting on the swale or grading or drainage plan of our lot or those of our neighbors. We take care of our property. We have planted 7 emerald cedars and 5 large grasses on the slope at the rear of the yard beside our shed, as well as a mature black birch in the yard between our deck and swale. And we maintain our lawn by mowing regularly and trimming around the fence line. We have included letters from our 3 adjacent neighbors with respect to the construction on our property. You will see that they raise no objections with respect to our deck construction or the location of our shed. You will see in the letters that our neighbor to the east helped us build our shed. They are upstream from our property and have not experienced any drainage issues as a result of our shed construction. We are hopeful that our submission will provide the committee insight and clarity, particularly with respect to our shed. We request that you please grant our application for these minor variances without conditions. If you do not see your way to granting the minor variance application unconditionally with respect to our deck and shed construction, we believe a site visit by the committee or appropriate designates in the spring, once all of this snow is cleared, would assist the committee in confirming that our shed is located behind and not within the swale and does not disrupt drainage. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that, here it is. Thank you. Sorry. These are just pictures, actually. They've got some labels on them, but if we can just go through them. Thank you, Brad. This is a picture of our deck construction when we had a lot less snow in Coldwater. Just generally demonstrates the construction and shows it how it attaches to our house. The next one is a little bit of a side angle. When we speak about reasonable size, we of course did not extend a deck across the entirety of our backyard. We did it within proximity to the walkout doors. Thank you. Next slide, please. This photograph does show the swale as it's known to us being constructed. This picture is actually of the rear of our yard from our neighbor's yard. You can see the slope behind the swell leading down to our rear property line and the tree line. The interesting piece of this is that you can see the landscaping cloth, it's about a, 24 inch long, roll is sitting, above and on the shoulders of the swell, which is dug in a V configuration into the ground. Next slide, please. There we go. This is the shed platform that I spoke of. You can see how it does extend down the hill, and that the grade has remained consistent with the remainder. Just wanted to demonstrate that it is on deck blocks. We didn't put footings or anything like that. Next, please. This shows the shed while it's under construction and being frame sided and the roof put on. I put the red line to indicate the line of the swell. In this case, because of the perspective, that's about the middle of the swell as it extends across the back of our yard, again ahead of the slope. Next slide, please. This is a bit more of an overhead shot from our deck, and the red lines help to outline the extent of what to be the swell that runs through our yard, and you can clearly see that the shed is back from and away from the swell. I installed the step more recently, and it's sitting on the surface of the ground. Next, please. This is just the front view of the shed. It's not a very dark line, but the red lines in front show the position of the swell and show that the deck or the shed is back behind it as well, that the deck is positioned slightly above the grade, and you can see the space underneath it. Next, please. This is the east side of the of our shed, and this is the location of the request for the setback, which presently is 0.9 meters and is supposed to be 1.5 meters. But I wanted to show that you can, it has ample space. I'm painting our shed, and my ladder is one of those ladders with the extendable or wider bases, and it sits in there well, and you can walk through that space to the rear of our property. I think it's also clear, as we alluded in our submission, that with the swell being in front of the shed, that work could be done and performed on it if it was in need of any remediation. Thank you. So our request for minor variance includes an increase of lot coverage of 3.9%. Our interior setback, as I've explained, to go from 0.9 meters to 1.5 meters, and for our rear yard setback to go from 1.4 meters to 1.5 meters. I do have a neighbor with us here tonight. I alluded to our neighbor to the east of our property. Chris Applin is here, and I, her husband Larry provided me the, one of the 3 letters that I received, that we received in support of our application. And he is the one that helped me build, construct our shed. I don't know if Chris has any comments that she wishes to weigh in on. If you could recognize her, Chair.
Yeah, we'll get to that point when she has an opportunity to speak.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
very good. Thank you.
You all good with all your information?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for your in-depth presentation. Do township staff have anything further to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant? And any recommended conditions that are applicable?
Thank you, Chair. So just to give some additional context to this application, the subject lands are highlighted in red here for the just to highlight their area. They are one of the lots in the newer Greenwood Landing subdivision in Coldwater, located behind Foodland, connecting to Gill Street. So the lands are shown there in red and are located sort of in the north corner of the development. Here we have the 2024 aerial imagery of the subject lands. So you can see they are developed with an existing single detached dwelling. The deck is located sort of off the rear left corner of the dwelling. And you can kind of see the shed there in the rear yard, although it is a little bit clouded with the branches of the existing tree in the rear yard. Just the site plan that was submitted by the applicant as part of this application, again, showing the location of the existing dwelling, the deck off the rear of that dwelling, together with the shed located in the rear corner of the property. So just included for some context is the lot grading plan that was prepared by Tatham Engineering as part of the development of these lands with the construction of the dwelling. I will note that Tatham Engineering did not include the shed or the deck on this plan because those were not contemplated as part of the building permit for the dwelling. Staff have just sort of overlaid on top of this grading plan approximate locations of the dwelling. Approximate locations of the deck and the shed. We did try to scale them as best we could, however, not intended to be the original purpose of this application. We do acknowledge that the locations are very approximate. So you can see sort of highlighted in yellow is what is the area considered to be the swale and the back slope. So the limits of the swale are delineated with black lines cutting through the rear portion of the lands on an angle. In the rear of the property there. Next slide, please. And just for some greater context, this is the overall approved lot grading plan for the Greenwood Landing subdivision. Sort of on the right-hand side, we have highlighted the lot together with the section detail for the swale with subdrain. And then just to zoom in there to give a little bit more detail, you can, I know it is a little bit challenging to see, but across the rear of the lot, there is a sort of arrowed line indicating the direction of flow of that swale with the subdrain. Some site photos here. These were again provided by the applicant, so you can see that existing deck attached to the dwelling together with the shed and step in the rear yard. So I just wanted to point out that as detailed within the staff report, the subdivision agreement does include provisions related to stormwater management to ensure the proper function of the swale and drainage infrastructure. Through the development of larger plans of subdivisions such as the Greenwood Landings, there is quite an increase in impervious surfaces throughout their development. You have the roofs of dwellings, paved streets, paved sidewalks, driveways, there become patio areas and rear yards of properties. There's definitely an increase to impervious surfaces. So through those subdivisions, a number of professional reports and studies, including stormwater management plans and lot grading plans, are required to be developed. Those plans do include a number of stormwater management features and areas to ensure that the runoff of those impervious surfaces do not negatively impact surrounding lands. So as noted in a previous slide, it did show that lot grading plan, including the swale, together with that subdivision agreement. It just ensures that there is those proper steps taken to ensure that there's no negative impacts as a result of stormwater management. So for those reasons, township staff do note that the minor variance is requesting reduced setbacks for the shed reduced setbacks to the interior and rear yard for the proposed shed. It is our opinion that as presented with the information available today, do not meet the 4 tests and are not consistent with the PPS. There is the potential for impeding the flow of stormwater, together with those subdivision agreement provisions prohibiting buildings and structures within swales and the concerns raised by the township's consulting engineer. Township staff do have no objection to the minor variances requested for an increased lot coverage. That lot coverage would be inclusive of the deck and the shed to allow the applicant to relocate the shed elsewhere on the property, accounting for its area. And we are of the opinion that that minor variance does meet the 4 test and is consistent with the PPS. Next slide. So for those reasons, it is the recommendation of planning and development staff that we have no objection to the approval of that minor variance for the increased lot coverage, subject to the recommended conditions as outlined in the staff report. Additionally, planning and development staff do recommend that the minor variances for a reduced interior and rear yard setback to accommodate the shed be denied for the reasons as outlined in the staff report. That is all I have for the committee at this time, but of course available if there's any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to this application? Seeing or hearing none, are there any persons in attendance in person who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to this application? You're going to address your questions through me. The applicant may be asked to respond to each party. When commenting, I would ask that you please give your name and address for the minutes, and you're going to have to speak into the microphone.
My name is Chris Applin. I'm a co-owner of Lot 5, known municipally as 155, which is joining the subject lot to the east. We support entirely the applicant's application. With respect to the rear setback, I think it would be prudent to have a proper measurement made, because I suspect Dwight did his measurements for the fence, and the fence is not physically on our lot lines. According to the surveys, our lot line is in the middle of the trunks of the big trees, and clearly the fence is well ahead of the trees because we wanted to stay away from drainage and roots. So I suspect if a proper measurement was made, I don't think there's an issue personally with the rear measurement from the from the lot line to the back of the shed. With respect to the side setback, I think the applicant has already addressed that. I think it is a minor variance under the spirit of the law, and that there's clearly no issues with drainage or maintenance or getting around the building. I would like to specifically address the swale issue that appears to me to be of the most concern. According to my lawyer, closing documents, surveys provided to me, and the title abstract, there is no rear swale. There is no notification, easement, or swale agreement on my title, and I believe they haven't been notified either, other than once you came out to inspect, then they were informed that there is a swale area. When our deals were closed, there's no reference plan. There's no notation on our surveys. So I think there's an issue. Where is the swale? In history, obviously there is an issue with this whole subdivision, with stormwater management, etc. When the builder, after they put all the lots, I'll go 1 to 8, because it really does go past 5. They tried doing the first grading. Before the sod was put on, there was a huge rainfall and water did flow to the north. So they came in and redid the entire grading in the back, lifted up the level, created the slope at a more angle, and put in, someone called it a French drain. I don't know if it is, but you've seen it in Dwight's photos. They dug down in a V, they put in the gravel. I watched them do it. Since that time, the water and the swale and the drain appears to be doing what it's supposed to be, sending the full flow of water from these lots to Gill Street, where there is a, I assume, storm drain. I believe if you are not in a position to approve this application, that at the very minimum, you need in the spring to come out and see where this actually is, because I don't think you have any evidence where this actual swale is located. I would love to be provided with any legal documentation that could let lots 1 to 5 know where this swale is and what we should potentially avoid or what we should do, because it's not identified. I have a copy of the subdivision agreement from my lawyer. Schedule D does refer to easements. Our lots 1 to 5 are not listed. Schedule F does have a long list of plans that apply to the development. But as each plan is listed, it does not state which lots they apply to. Dwight showed me a plan that he was provided, and it's in the PowerPoint that you cannot read. You can't see any measurements. It doesn't define the swale. I don't even know if it's a swale. It looks like what it is, but I submit, is that where it's actually located? I guess that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I assume there's no other persons in attendance who's going to speak in opposition or whatever. So if there's no further comments, I declare the public portion of the application closed.
Wait, sorry,
Excuse me.
we
Oh,
wanted to amend something after.
Am I able to?
Yeah, because after your submission, we wanted to answer one thing.
Okay.
As a result of the staff's presentation, I saw something there we've never seen before, and we're not in possession.
It's like
That's
this.
the skeleton brown wall or
It
skeleton
is
brown?
the Tatham Engineering. It's a site grading plan, lot grading plan.
That looks like it's got a
And-
camera on.
And it's been provided to me. It was provided to me on my application. The response that to my application, and it was provided to us once again when we made the application for minor variance.
Has to see this.
The area that was highlighted in, I think, in a color, we can see the slide again perhaps, and it indicated, it talked about the slope. On these documents, that's simply not present. And we know that there is a slope of land, but the slope of land is not articulated in any documents that we have as it relates to the flow of stormwater. And I have to
That one
say,
there.
yeah, this is something new with the swale back slope label. That is on nothing that we have. It's on nothing that we are provided in our purchase agreement. And as I explained, the front of this swale that exists above the slope is closer to the middle of our backyard than it is to the rear. So even the location on this map of our shed, it is not there. That shed has it on the swale. I could say the swale proper. It is not, as I've shown in my photographs, because where the water flows through that line to Gill Street, you can see it run through our yards because that grass grows longer, quicker, and it's always nice and green. The bottom, this is what astounds me, is the decision to make a transition slope that is beyond the swale that is collecting drain water on our lot to take it to the ditches at Gill Street. It's intercepting the water before it gets to the slope. And when you slope lands in transition down to the north, to the property that the intention is not to put water towards, I have a hard time, I'm not an engineer, I have a hard time understanding that a slope that is not footed by a drain, which is graded towards the ditches at Gill Street and Sunset, with any water that goes on that slope goes to the north, to the property to the north of us. Where's it to go? Water goes downhill. That's what's been constructed. And in the agreement, in our subdivision agreement, as I stated, it's talked specifically about swales. There is no mention in section 18 about transition slopes as they relate to swales. I mean, I guess they exist, but in the swale section of the subdivision, they are absent. There's no talk about it. It makes no sense to suggest that a slope of that nature is doing anything to prevent water from flowing onto the property of the north. The clear intention of the swale, as it's installed and stated, is to deliver water laterally across the properties to drain into the Gill Street ditches. There is no other ditching at the bottom of that transition to accommodate that in any way.
And placing it there is.
And this is, in my view, a very misleading. In fact, it's inaccurate. And the satellite imagery that was shown was actually one of the better photos because it shows the green line and it shows the roof and the front extent of the shed. And it shows how the green line is separated from the shed.
In front of it.
And by being in front of it. So the bottom line is, I think a remedy, if the intent is for water not to flow on the neighboring property to the north, there should have been, or there should have been consideration to a retaining wall that raised the level of the lands, and the swale as installed could have existed at the back ahead of that retaining wall, but that would have been a method to deliver stormwater to the ditching system and not have the water enter onto the properties of the north. But by design, this is happening, and to now say that the transition slope is a part of the swale when it doesn't appear anywhere else on any legal
Or
document.
to suggest that you move it ahead of
And-
the swale.
Yeah, and you can see as
Why
well.
would you interrupt the water that way?
So I understand there's a lot of frustration. Okay, I understand there's a lot of frustration with the swale, a lot of frustration with all that. This, it's way above me with regards to the swale. There's more educated people than I am that have provided comments to this that, when we get to our portion of it, I think there'll be either support for an approval of some sort of the application or deferral or whatever, which that's
I
what this
appreciate
committee
that.
is to do with that. But I can tell you, making a decision on a swale and what's involved in a swale and the terminology involved and sloping and all that far supersedes this committee, and more on the consulting engineer, more with your lawyer, your title insurance, your all that type of stuff. That's more the avenue where that resides. And unfortunately, we're here to make a decision on the application on those things that are there. And yeah, I do understand there's a lot of frustration and all that. And, you know, I understand that, but you know, we've heard a lot. And thank you for that. I do want to give everyone here the opportunity to ask questions if they have any, and then we'll discuss the application and go from there. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Bossy.
Question to staff. What is the governing document that decides this? Is it the subdivision agreement?
Through the chair to member Bossy, yes, it is a subdivision agreement that establishes these sort of restrictions on a property to protect that stormwater infrastructure.
Member Bossy.
To staff again through the chair. So is the slope always considered part of the swale? As shown in this document?
Stop.
Through the chair, the back slope would be separate from the swale, but it is all part of that stormwater infrastructure.
Councilor Staff.
If I could just maybe add to the committee, staff are operating off of this engineered lot grading plan that was provided as part of the building permit for the overall development of this lot. And through the preparation of that plan and the review of the file, township staff did receive a sign off from the engineer of record confirming that the lands were generally developed in accordance with this plan. If the committee was interested in looking at a deferral as the applicant has requested, staff would not object to that consideration. You know, the applicant would need to understand that they would need to likely retain an engineer who's going to update this plan to confirm the location of the swale, as well as plotting the location of the shed, together with, you know, some sort of details from an engineer detailing how the location of this shed is not going to impact any stormwater management design from the overall subdivision. The township's engineer would review that at the applicant's expense, but then I could present something back to the committee from that. I can't guarantee that there would be a favorable determination from that additional work done. Like I said, staff wouldn't object to the committee considering the applicant's request for a deferral to allow for that additional review. And that is an option should the committee wish to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Hawkins, sorry.
Through the chair to staff, that's kind of where I was going with my question. Can they contact the engineer of record for the site plan agreement to have them do a new like lot grading sign off and a confirmation of setbacks with the presentation? What kind of report back to us are they affecting the overall drainage of the whole development?
Through the chair to member Hawkins, for sure, staff can provide you know, an original copy of the plan that's on screen there to the applicant, which would obviously include the contact information for the engineer on record. And if they wanted to reach out to them to sort of look at getting an update to this plan done, you know, plotting the location of the deck, plotting the location of the shed, confirming the location of the swale. If it does differ from what's shown on this plan, then by all means we could share that with them to get that process initiated.
Thank you. Member Hawkins.
So just including through to the staff, including with that recommendation is if it affects the like not just plotting everything and where it all is, but their engineer's response or engineer's ruling on if it would impose onto the grading, or onto the drainage as a part of their letter.
Through the chair, yes, I think, you know, given the comments from the township's consulting engineer up to this point, identifying and raising concerns related to impacts to stormwater management. Having that response from an engineer who's been retained by the applicants, reviewing the stormwater management, their sort of response in determining whether or not the shed is going to impact stormwater, which could then further be looked at by the township's engineer.
You, Member Kish.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff. I guess a question, how does a swale influence decisions to interior and rear lot setbacks from my minor variance standpoint? So from my time here on committee, we're supposed to always look at these as individual items, not necessarily taking into account other issues. If there's an issue with a swale, to me, that's a separate item that should be dealt with as a different matter.
Through the chair to member Kish. So as staff, included within our staff report, the provincial planning statement, the township's official plans, all include policies which relate to stormwater management. Through the review of this application, it was the understanding of staff that this shed was located within the swale, given those setbacks. So given that understanding was how staff came to the opinion as presented within the staff report, because it was our understanding that this shed was located within the swale, which is in conflict of not only the stormwater management provisions of the subdivision agreement, but also the stormwater management policies of the PPS and the official plans.
Kish.
Just to follow up through the chair to staff. Did the township engineer actually attend the site and look to see how impeding this shed was on the swale?
Through the chair to member Kish, I would have to confirm whether or not the engineer was on site. What I can confirm for you is that the township's engineer is very familiar with this site and has been involved since day one with everything to do with the design of any engineering matters on site throughout this property.
Hey, Member Bossy.
More of a comment, but the staff through the chair. But if we're considering the slope, part of this, part of the drainage or the swale, the whole point is moot to come in and have somebody tell us where the swale is. Is it not?
Staff.
Through the chair to member Bossy, I think at this point it's unclear where the swale is. The applicant is saying that it is not located as shown on this plan. Based on township records, we understand that that's where it is located. We have a sign off from an engineer saying that that is where the swale is located. But the applicant is, has a different opinion as to where that swale is located. So at this point in time, if the applicant wishes for the deferral to confirm that, staff have no objection.
Bossy.
To staff through the chair. I guess the point I'm making is if you're considering the whole yellow area part of the swale, then to find out where the actual swale is doesn't do anything. So I guess the question comes down to who determines what's part of the swale and not part of the swale, because what I'm hearing is from the agreements they have that it's just the swale, not slope.
So to answer your question, I know staff maybe have a different opinion, but a lot of these agreements, a lot of the drawings would have detailed specifications on what things are and what things aren't. So the swale should be identified on that drawing in detail.
I'm
Member Bossy.
sorry, I know I'm probably not
no,
supposed to speak, but they don't exist.
Just hold on. I'm gonna public portions closed and
Sorry.
I get it, okay?
Sorry.
Member Bossy.
I understand the swale. We'll find out where the swale is. But if we're going to include that whole yellow slope piece, that doesn't really matter to this application, because then it's got to come way forward towards the house, does it not? Member Hawkins?
Through the chair. I think that's part of, if we get into having that engineer confirm where that line is, for the central line, and they will confirm if the construction of the shed location affects what is feeding it in their engineering review of the overall site plan.
Member Hiles?
Through the chair to staff. I am in agreement that a deferral sounds probably in our best bet, a couple of months, and the ultimate test will happen in the spring when all this snow melts and we will see how all of this fares out. But if the shed needs to be moved, what is the time frame given for such for the applicant to make those changes?
Through the chair to member Hiles. I don't have an exact timeline of what that would be. Obviously, township staff would be reasonable in working with the applicant to give them an opportunity. We're not going to impose like a 24-hour timeline on that. But we would, discuss with the applicant and come up with a reasonable solution that works for both parties.
Member Kish?
Sorry, just one more to go a little bit further on member Bossy's question. So is there anything against having a shed on a back slope, or is it just the swale? To township staff, sorry.
Through the chair to member Kish, the subdivision agreement does speak specifically to the term swale. Obviously, at the recommendation of the township's engineer, the back slope area was also recommended to be unobstructed and left vegetated as originally intended. If the applicants are proposing something different, their engineer would need to justify the location and placement of the shed in this area to the satisfaction of the township's engineer, and demonstrating that it's not in conflict with the subdivision agreement.
Okay, thank you. That's all the comments that we have. Kind of understanding is probably a deferral works the best. I've heard it mentioned 3 times. I believe the applicants asked for a deferral. I think this is the best situation and moving path forward for this application. So I would call for a motion for a deferral. Be put up. And then do we need to put a date on it to come back? Do we go?
I was gonna say, how long is it gonna take for the snow to melt?
See how this happens so fast. No.
Chair, is there any opportunity just for comment respecting is it possible for, does the application have to be, does the deferment of the application have to apply to the entire application? There doesn't seem to be the same issue, if you will, with the lot area, but appreciate that. I am just, it's sort of a point of order, I guess.
I would maybe township staff want to comment on that, but I would say that it'd probably be best to keep it together and then move forward that way, because if there are things that change throughout it, then it just you don't have to come back and re-request. So I would say let's just keep it all together. It's tidier that way. So I have a motion before me, moved by member Hiles, second by member Hawkins, that staff report B 25-005 be received, and that the matter of minor variance application A-03-25, the application be deferred pending additional information which may include peer review at the expense of the applicant, and further that the application be brought forward to the committee before the June 17th, 2025 meeting in consideration of Planning Act notice and review requirements, or the file will be closed. Okay.
I'm just thinking if snow doesn't melt, so. That makes sense. Yeah.
So why don't we just bump it till September and that's fine. Staff.
Through the chair, I think there is a little bit of urgency to this file as well. Given that there is some building without a permit on the property, together with the potential impacts to the swale. I think that there is a little bit of urgency. So if the committee would maybe like to consider July or potentially August, I think that would be better than pushing it, as far back as September.
And let's make it August and get it up there. That's all good. So I won't read it all. But, and further that the application be brought forward to the committee at or before the August 19th, 2025 meeting in consideration of Planning Act notice and review requirements, or the file will be closed. So I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor? We are carried. Thank you. The hearing for that application is now closed. You are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting if you so wish. Moving on. So I'm going to call for a motion for adjournment. We have a motion COA 2025-009, moved by member Hawkins, second by member Bossy, that the Committee of Adjustment be adjourned at 8:47 p.m. Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. And call for a vote. All those in favor? We are carried. Thank you.
Thank you.